Autograph, the newest app out there, taking the college fandom world by storm. Also, Iowa Smokehouse, proud supporter of our post-game coverage, NCAA tournament or not. They are here with us and giving you some details on some pretty cool opportunity through our March Madness Bracket Challenge, which features the men and the women. So check that out. You got a couple of days to get your picks in and part of our Iowa Smokehouse Bracket Challenge. Use the code Hawkeyes over at iowasmokehouse.com for 15% off your total order. Again, that's the code Hawkeyes at iowasmokehouse.com for 15% off your total order. You spend $50, you'll get free shipping. Support the people that make this show possible. Man, we're doing post-game shows all the time this time of year, really from September into April, assuming the women make another run, and maybe the men will make a run in this tournament, recapping a Hawkeye victory in the NIT this evening. But again, iowasmokehouse.com. Taste their meat sticks, their jerky. Everything's great. Use the code Hawkeyes for 15% off your total order. And with that being said, we have a special guest here this evening, none other than a good friend of mine, Frank Henderson from the Indianapolis area. And if anybody doesn't know Frank, I introduce you the same way each time. You're a former D1 basketball player. Your nephew is Tony Perkins. He, of course, has been right now he's a senior. He's got maybe a couple games left or more if he decides to come back. But good win for the Hawkeyes tonight against a really tough Kansas State team. it had come up with some big wins throughout the season. But before we talk about this game, Frank, thank you for being here. I know this is hard for you, probably just like it is for all of us, because we all wanted to be talking about an NCAA tournament team at this point. But give me your initial thoughts on Fran McCaffery's decision, or even kind of like what he talked about with the media this week. It was almost like not even really a decision for him.
Right.
The fact that they did decide to play in this tournament when a number of other high major teams decided to opt out.
No, I agree with Fran. I'm the same way. If it's time to play, let's play. Let's rock. Let's roll. Let's get it going. As long as you have an opportunity to continue in the postseason, why not? I wouldn't turn it down either.
Can you explain? I asked Kasheen Alexander on our women's show the other night, her vantage point on this, but can you explain why some of these programs, high major programs, St. John's, Indiana, go down the list, why they're turning down opportunities to play?
That's a good question. I mean, I think it might be a pride issue. It might be a player's decision, because I've heard speculation from other programs. Not quite sure if Fran asked this question, but I've heard coaches ask their players, do you guys want to play? There's some responses where some players are like, I don't want to play, coach, or hey, I'm hurt, I'm injured, let me take care of this injury. So I've heard that speculation throughout college basketball in general, but ultimately it's the coach's decision. If he says, hey, we're playing, the guys are going to play. But if you leave it on the team and the players, it can go either way.
I thought it was an interesting little rant that we heard. I don't know if you caught it from Tom Crean on ESPN, former Indiana coach. And I got a lot of respect for Tom Crean. I mean, he's obviously a high major coach, didn't work out at Indiana. You're an Indiana guy, so you probably know a lot more about Tom Crean than I do. But like, the Hoosiers were criticized, and I think rightfully so, by Tom, as well as the other teams. I think if there's players, frankly, Frank, I think if there's players saying, I don't want to play, that is a bad reflection on coaching and culture.
It is.
So I don't know how you really defend it. Either way, I totally agree with you, and I totally agree with Fran McCaffery on this. I don't really know how you defend that, because there's no way you're going to be able to sit here and tell me that you don't have enough players to put guys out on the court. And, even I think it was Tom mentioned, or maybe it was somebody else I was listening to in the media today, was talking about, hey, even if you need to have some coaches missing, if the portal and recruiting are that important right now this week, then have a couple assistants not be on the bench. Like, do anything you can to keep your guys engaged. And if they're the ones making the decision not to play, then you need to take a hard look in the mirror. And if I'm the AD and someone running that program, that athletic department, I'm looking at my coaching staff and at my program saying, boy, we may need look at some changes. And by the way, Mike Woodson's he should already be on the hot seat, because he has been a disaster there from the get-go. So I know that, they've got a mindset. We got to head to the transfer portal and focus on the window being open. And that's a totally different discussion as to why the window needs to open now when it does. But anyways, I just thought we could start with that, because it is relevant to this discussion.
No, it's very relevant. I mean, in the worst case scenario, this is how it would be as a coach. If you do have a certain guys who say, hey, coach, I don't want to play, I'm going to focus on my future, I might consider transferring out, or hey, I'm thinking about going pro, so I don't want to risk my chance of getting hurt. Like you said, by all means necessary, my 7th, 8th, 9th, 10th, 11th guy who hasn't played much, they'll play. As long as we're competing at a high level, give those guys an opportunity, let them flourish. But at the same time, I'm glad, like I said earlier, I'm glad Fran said, hey, we're going to play regardless. We were invited. Let's do it. Because if not, what does that continuously say about the NIT? That we just don't care about it? Because, we're going to constantly have this rhetoric and discussion every single year. The NIT might just go away completely. So some of those hometown phrases, which we do like seeing, like Iowa, if they don't make it to NCAA, do we just end the season there? So I think playing in the NIT is a big deal. I think they should push kids to play. And if not, those kids who don't get as much minutes, if they're not your starters, at least let them flourish and play, get some significant minutes.
How about this for an idea? And I know our guy Tony, who's on hold right now on our Iowa Smokehouse call-in line, has a unique perspective, because he's kind of a guru when it comes to knowing the ins and outs of these tournaments. But how about this for a rule change? We're talking about rule changes for the NIT and these different things they experiment with. How about making all players eligible if you're in the NIT, including players who redshirted. So in other words, make Riley Mulvey eligible to play where he's not at risk of losing his year of eligibility. Like, that's the kind of thing. If you're the NCAA and you're going to make this transfer portal window open when it does, then you gotta give some other incentive for play. I mean, I don't think you should need those other incentives, but the fact that all these high major programs have opted out is an indication that you're the NCAA. And believe you me, you and I both know this, Frank. The NCAA is not known for being very proactive in their thinking with anything. But if you're the NCAA, you got to be looking ahead and in a way reactionary to what's happening here and saying, hey, we got to figure out a way to make sure that these programs have incentives to play. And I don't know that they have the do they have the leverage, the authority to fine programs for not playing? I don't think so. I don't think anybody's required to play, but do think something like that, because there's 13 guys that are supposed to be on scholarship. Plus the men's game has a plethora of walk-ons.
Yeah.
You cannot convince me that they don't have enough guys. So I am happy. I know that there's been a lot of criticism heaped upon Fran McCaffrey over the last couple of weeks. And I'm not saying it's undeserved by any means. I know some people think I'm a Fran apologist. I'm not, it is what it is. But as it relates to his decision to play in this tournament, I absolutely agree with. And he had these guys ready, Frank. I mean, this is a tough Kansas State team. They've knocked out, they knocked off Kansas. They knocked off Iowa State, knocked off Texas Tech, I believe it was. They've had good wins, but Iowa came out there and basically led from start to finish. Defense wasn't perfect, but you put up 91 on a Big 12 team, you're probably going to have a pretty good chance of winning in spite of a pretty lax crowd. I think we expected a pretty thin group out there today, but they came out to play. Just what did you see from the get-go?
Yeah, I think that energy that we had tonight, we should have had this energy against Illinois on that very last game of the season. They came out ready to play. Same thing that started off with Ohio State. We have to come ready to play. We have to come with energy. We have to come with assertiveness and be ready to ball at all times. Those last two games of the season, Illinois and Ohio State, we came out very laxed. We came out very robotic. We came out like, okay, we're going to go through the motions. We might win the game. We might not know. It is game time. We have to win these key games. Back to your comment about the NIT and NCAA. I want to pick your brain, Corey. Since we're doing NIL, should there be a money incentive? Let's say NCAA, winner gets $1 million shared amongst 13 guys. Let's say NIT, you get $500,000 shared amongst 13 guys. You think that's a fair incentive to say for NIT and NCAA for guys to play?
Yeah, sure. I mean, I don't know if those are fair numbers, if those work out logistically. It sounds good. I mean, here's the bottom line. A lot of these, once we can figure out collective bargaining and salary caps and all this stuff where players are actually getting paid by the institutions, that's a problem, because you can't pay the players. Right now, the universities cannot technically pay the players, so you have all these third parties paying the players via NIL.
Right.
How does NIL incentivize these kids to play? I think that's absolutely. I think if
can the NCAA can they hire a third party to be at NIL for the NCAA? That's an idea. I mean, think about it. If I go to NIT and you just ask me what incentive do I have to play in NIT, and players are opting out and coaches are opting out, but if you tell a guy who's thinking about transferring, and let's say we are a Villanova, for example, a big name school who typically wins NCAA tournaments, but now we're in NIT. Hey, we're not NCAA, but if we win this NIT, I get $500,000 to share collectively amongst 1 through 13. I think guys, and I don't even know the math with that. What's that? That's what, 50,000, 40,000, 40,000 per player. Those guys that in the bench, 8, 9, 10, 11 guys, they're not really getting NIL money like that. Unless you're at a really high major program like a Kansas or a Duke or North Carolina or something of that sort. But if you're 8, 9, 10, 11, man, your NIL pocket is probably at best $10,000 or $15,000 in a year. But if you can get 40 or 50 off this one tournament, hell yeah, I'm going to play and bust my ass and be a best, cheerleader for my teammates and my starters to play. Why not? The NCAA they have room to grow. They have ways of spinning this in their favor. But again, it just takes somebody, like you said, with the right brain power to put things together to make it happen.
I am not a former head coach, certainly not a D1 basketball player. Here's what I'll say, though, as it relates to incentivizing players to play. As I said earlier, I think if players don't want to play, that's an indication of maybe some cultural issues.
It is.
Coaching issues.
Yeah.
So I'll take it that far. But if I'm a head coach, here's what I'm doing, Frank. If I've got guys who say, A, I don't want to play, or B, I'm not playing because I'm entering the transfer portal, then my response to those players is I'm getting ready for postseason. If I find out my team gets an NIT invitation, is I'm saying to those guys, all right, be on your way. We don't need you here. Because that ain't what – here goes that little thumbs up thing.
Yeah.
Apologize to everybody for that. But that's what I would say. I'd say be on your way because this is the culture here. And if I'm the head coach, I'm not letting my players determine whether or not we accept an invitation. And I guarantee you here's the thing, and this is something I speculated about on Sunday, Frank, is I said, well, how do we know that Indiana or St. John's, they don't have 10, 11 guys entering the portal? My guess is that's not what's happening.
No.
Like if say Rick Pitino knows he's got 12 guys entering the portal, then he maybe legitimately doesn't have enough guys to field a team. I get that. But I don't think that's happening. I don't think we're seeing that big of an overhaul. And again, ultimately, if guys want to opt out, they can opt out. But I think you, as the head coach of the program, are still the decision maker. We can't put this on the players. If they don't have enough incentive to play, then they're not the type of cultural fit that we want with our program. Does that make sense?
That makes 100%. Like you said again, it's culture. At the end of the day, I'm the head coach. I run the show. That's the way you run your program. So, but if you run a program where you have to kind of just play with it a little bit and you really don't know exactly what you're doing and they kind of sense that insensitivity of you as a coach, you don't really have a full grasp of your team. You're not really the head of the snake. You have to be that guy that dives in first and leads that charge. So if you have that culture and that firepower, your team will follow.
And these Hawkeyes came to play tonight. I'll give them credit because, again, in spite of criticism people want to heap on Fran McCaffrey, it is what it is. But I'm telling you right now, he had these guys ready to play. Frank, maybe you can give us some insight about the persona, the mojo of this squad since basically they were eliminated from NCAA tournament consideration with that loss to Ohio State. But I think there are some coaches that could have lost their team. And maybe that's what's happening with some of these teams that opted out is the coaches lost their team. And that's, again, on the head coaches. That doesn't happen with Iowa.
No.
It seems like even when Iowa has failed to make an NCAA tournament, they compete in the NIT. I think the one exception maybe being the year where they lost to Indiana last game of the year and then lost early in the NIT. But we saw them make a run really early in the Fran era to Madison Square Garden to the championship game, fell just short. We saw them lose out to at Oregon, but won a couple of games that year early in Fran's tenure. And today, again, a strong start. This looked like the same team we've seen. Inconsistencies on the defensive end, but ability to score a lot of points. And I thought it started with Peyton Sandfort. He was terrific. 30 points made. He's 5 of 6 from the free throw line. Overall from the game, Peyton was 9 of 14, 7 of 11 from 3, added 12 rebounds, 30 and 12 and 7 threes. You're putting that kind of performance together. If you do that consistently and you're a decent enough defender with that length, he is an NBA prospect. Now, I don't think he is right now, but just talk about what we've seen from Peyton, even when the team has struggled here late in the season.
Peyton's been very consistent. I will say this. I mean, just the hunger to continue to shoot and to continue to be a prominent factor on the offensive floor. I commend Peyton for that confidence and that effort because whether he's 7 for 11 or he's 0 for 12, I mean, Peyton's going to shoot and make his presence know that he's always going to be a threat. I think it's fair to say, I know you said you might not think he's an NBA prospect. I think it's fair to say that Peyton has worked himself up to be that. You know what I'm saying? He may have some defensive, lacks here and there, but as far as a three-point threat, I mean, that's where the NBA game is headed today. I mean, it's predicated on shooting. There's not much defense actually being played in today's game with offense being the ticket seller. So he has the opportunity. He has a chance. But again, to your point earlier, and this is something I've talked to my sister about, when Iowa had that 7-day break after they played – who they played before Illinois?
Northwestern.
I think that hurt us. I think that's what would change the culture, because when you have a legitimate, you play Saturday and you don't play until that following Sunday. I don't
Yeah.
really like that. That kind of scares me a little bit, because again, you're giving your team rest for one, which is needed, but also you can also lose hindsight of, we played at a sense of urgency because we played 2-3 games a week to get us to this point. Now we're taking a huge break. You know what I mean? So I think there was some type of, I don't know, that kind of threw off their mojo a little bit. But again, to your second point of why they played well is because, again, like I said earlier in previous shows, these guys like each other. There's teams who literally come together just for profitability, just for NIL, just to get my namesake to make it to the NBA draft. They don't like each other. It's like, dude, I'm here for a year and I'm gone. Iowa is a program that most of the time you come to Iowa, you have to be a 3-year, 4-year player to go to the NBA. Luckily, we have, previous examples like a Keegan Murray that's gone in 2 years. But most of the time, it's a 3 to 4-year program. These guys know that. So obviously, to get along and be effective in Fran's system, you're going to be here for the long haul. So I got to like who I'm playing with in order to succeed.
Peyton Sandfort, our player of the game. RTI Threads player of the game, 30 points. Who else? 7 of 11 from 3, 12 rebounds. Those are marquee numbers, and he keeps doing that. They got it. I mean, I know this is crazy saying this after round 1, but they got a chance to win this tournament. Like, there's nobody in the bracket that I'm like, oh, they can't beat that team. Right. But they can also, Frank, that they can lose to some teams.
Yeah.
I mean, the Ohio State team that they got beat, from start to finish by here the other night, that they're in this tournament. Yeah. So, this is a good win, and Sandfort, again, Peyton's ability to shoot this high of a percentage from 3 obviously is going to help them. He's rebounding the ball as well as he has ever right now. So latter half of this season, he's been terrific on the glass. So again, RTI Threads player of the game. And speaking of RTI Threads, been plugging them throughout the year, but check out their Iowa baseball gear over at iowabaseballswarm.com. Support that Iowa baseball team, folks. Good Hawkeyes on that team, battling right now early in the year. And just a great company. Marty Millard and the guys over at RTI Threads. And Marty works with a ton of Iowa high school athletes. Like, he's all about the players, the individuals, the small town athletes. Check it all out. iowabaseballswarm.com, rtithreads.com for the full NIL lineup, courtesy of RTI Threads. Let's go to our Iowa Smokehouse call line. We've got our man Tony with us. Tony, welcome.
Frank, your idea about the NIT is genius, because they're already looking at something like that for a preseason tournament next year, where $1 million goes to the winner and the kids get it through NIL. It's an invitation-only type tournament, but it's something that's already being looked into, and maybe they can get that rolling through the NCAA. I mean, we all know the NCAA is not strapped for cash, so they could afford something like that,
right?
To make more interest. A quote after the game, they asked Ben Krikke about teams opting out. He said, "The NIT is very valuable. I'm so grateful and happy that my college career gets to go on for a little while." So these players still want to play too. Like you said, it's a culture thing.
That's good. That's good. That is, again, say what you want. Mm-hmm. That's good culture.
Yeah.
That is good culture. Whether you like Fran McCaffrey, you want him gone, you're done with it, fine. That is good culture. And again, it's clear. It was apparent to me tonight that he has not lost this team whatsoever. And Frank, isn't there a risk of losing a team when you're that close to the NCAA tournament and there was that much riding on 2 games and you kind of lay an egg both nights? Isn't there that fear of, hey, if we don't have a great solid foundation here, we could lose our guys?
Yeah, for sure. Like we said earlier, and like Tony just mentioned, Ben made a good point. I want to play. I want to continue my career. I mean, Ben came from Valpo. I don't think he's been to the NCAA either his 3 years that he was playing. So from a high mid-major guy to go to a high major school, NIT, NCAA, he's just happy to be there, because usually when it comes to mid-majors like myself, when I was playing for the MAC conference, if we did not win the MAC, the season was done.
Yeah.
There was no NIT. There was no NCAA. And I feel sorry for that school. Well, I think they made it. Indiana State, they're in the NIT this year, aren't they?
They are. Yes.
Yeah. So just imagine if Indiana State was snubbed. They're mid-major. Players like those guys, my season's done. But thank God that they're in. So again, to your point, it's good culture. That's just what it is.
Yeah. How can you fix a team? You guys have kind of alluded to it, and I ask that opens and closes halves. It seems like so poorly. Like we'll have like tonight, for perfect example. We open the second half, we give up a 10-0 run, and it seems like we have a chance. Like, what is it that is like a message not getting across in the locker room, or is it they just need to get a few minutes to get going, or how can you make adjustments to make sure that doesn't happen?
Great question, Tony. I mean, I can just go based off my experiences. I always kept my team humble. I always kept them like, we're the underdogs. We always felt like the underdogs. At one point in time, I had a pretty star-studded team. I believe Tony's 16U team for EG10. We were 13th in the nation as far as the AAU program. But every game we feel like the underdogs because I was just like, okay, you guys are being overlooked. You guys are not being seen. You guys aren't being appreciated. So having that hunger mentality, and I want to give my hats off to the coach of UConn. UConn plays with an underdog chip on them. They never let up. They never let go of what the end goal is. So just keeping your team focused, you know what I mean? Again, it plays a little bit in culture. It also plays into the type of players you have as well. I wish I was in those locker rooms trying to know exactly what's going on with Fran, but I can't come out the half too excited because I still have 20 minutes left to play.
Yep.
Whether we're up 10 or up 20, hey, what Kobe say? Job's not done. It's not over. These are the mistakes we made first half, up 25. I don't care about that. It's back 0-0. Let's get back out there and kick ass and get some things going. That's just my mentality,
That was all you alluded to what I was going to follow up with saying is it almost like always having that the game is a 0-0 game at all times.
The game is not over to that final four blows.
Yeah. And then you just always have, it doesn't matter whether you're up 20 or it's a 0-0 game and you just keep playing at that.
Yeah.
I know this might be looking ahead, but we've talked about it. Has Tony ever played at Hinkle?
Has he? I don't think he has. No. So back in Indianapolis, we used to host the Indianapolis schools, which is called the mid. I don't even know. It's called the MIC. I don't know what the I stands for. I'm having a brain fart, but it's the MIC conference. That's usually like
Indiana?
No, I don't think it's Indiana. But they're gonna clown me in the comments for me forgetting what the I stands for in the MIC. But the MIC conference is like the major big Indianapolis suburban schools around the capital, right? So back in the day when I was playing, we always hosted regionals, which is right before semi-state at Hinkle. We used to always have a Christmas tournament that would play at Hinkle. Back when I was in high school, that was 2005, 6, and 7. So you're talking Courtney Lee, Jeff Teague, Mike Conley, Greg Oden, those guys played at Hinkle during that time. But they went away from that and just started hosting regionals at different high schools. So I wish they would bring it back to Hinkle since it's a staple in Indianapolis. I mean, from Butler to Indianapolis is like a 10-minute drive, So, but I don't think he has. I can't recall if he has or not. No.
Okay. And then one closing question, and I have another comment. Jess Settles made mention about Owen Freeman going to spend time with like Luca and Frank Garza this summer. Has Tony ever spent time with like former players in the summers?
Yes. What's kind of funny is we actually, I'm very close with Eric Gordon, with his dad and the son. Of course, we played for the AAU program. So 2 summers ago, not last summer, the summer before, we spent 2 weeks in Houston, and Tony worked out with Eric and some of the G League Rocket players and some former NBA guys that had open runs in leagues. I've actually reached out to a friend of mine that's kind of close with Mike Conley. If their season does open up in the summer, which I think the Timberwolves are going to go pretty far in the playoffs this year, for whatever reason, if Mike did not have a postseason, I asked Mike, can he work out with Tony? So I always try to give him a pro perspective on how he can improve his game, because I only played at the mid-major level. So there's some key things I might be missing as far as teaching my nephew that somebody from that expertise can kind of give him some knowledge to improve his game on.
And just for the record, I know Luca Garza is really good friends with Mike Conley. And has got a lot of respect for Mike Conley, so maybe there's a connection there as well.
I actually, what's funny, you just reminded me, I actually ran into Frank All-Star Weekend.
Okay.
Yeah, I ran the Frank Garza All-Star Weekend here in Indianapolis, and I was actually going to the parking garage of this hotel when I was to my car, and I called Frank in the lobby, and we talked for like 5 or 10 minutes.
Yeah. Frank's a good guy.
Yeah, yes.
We're going to get Frank on here at some point soon, Tony. I've had a couple of conversations here recently with Frank, and he's a busy guy. But no, I think here's what I'll say about Tony's development. And Frank, you're closer to Tony than any of us, but I am seeing a guy who's going through, I don't want to call it a slump. I don't know what it is right now. Like we'll read these stats because, these are the stats are what the stats are.
Right.
This guy was, your nephew was rolling at, really November into December into January. And then all of a sudden we hit, really it started that game at Maryland. All right. So he comes off a couple performances where he goes a combined 9 of 15. Then he goes 3 of 13 at Maryland, 6 of 16 at home against Wisconsin, 3 of 9 at Michigan State, 5 of 14 at Illinois. Goes 3 of 4 against Penn State, 4 of 14 at Northwestern, 1 of 10 against Illinois, 3 of 8 against Ohio State. Tonight he goes 4 of 12 from the field. So before somebody else asks you this question, I'll just ask you it, and you can answer it how you see fit. Sure. What's going on with Tony?
Just keeping your head up, being confident. If we look back at a point in time, remember when Peyton, remember that time he won that 3-point streak? It was like 0 for like 38. It was something crazy.
Yep.
But the reason you are 0 for 30 is because you have the confidence to continue to shoot. Just because you have a bad game, it shouldn't allude to the next game, and it shouldn't carry over to the next game. Shake that shit off and keep playing. Excuse my language, but you got to keep playing. You know what I mean? That's one thing I always, allude to him. And granted, he is a coach's kid. So one thing I will say about my nephew, which is a good thing, is that whatever Fran asks of him, he's going to do that. But I think sometimes just as an uncle, I'm like, dude, sometimes he recruits you because of your mindset. He recruits you because of your game. Sometimes this goes to any player. Sometimes trust your instincts and trust your gut. I know your coach wants you to be this type of player and be this type of person for the program, but you still got to trust your own instincts and play your game your way you know how, because that's what got you to Iowa in the first place. I think Peyton, I don't know what Fran is telling his players, but I think Peyton has never dished away from being Peyton because he's going to shoot the ball regardless, and you're going to have hot streaks. You're going to have cold streaks, and that's to every player. Not saying that this slump for my nephew's going to continue, but he will pick it back up and continue to have strong games, But as you said, he's kind of brought his stats down a little bit. But I would say year to year, he has improved, though.
Oh, 100%. And people live in the moment. I mean, I think we have to acknowledge that people live in the moment. And, the reality is Tony had been having, I thought, a really good senior year prior to this last month. And I'm sure he's kicking himself for this. He's as down about it as anybody.
Yeah.
And, the key is, I think, trying to drown out the outside noise. Mm-hmm. And that's not easy for anybody to do.
No.
I thought it was funny today, Tony. So after the Caden Proctor news broke, and I will address that here in a few minutes. But after the Caden Proctor news broke, I started getting ripped on social media, and I'm like, what did I do? What did I do? Like, I didn't, but I realized, I'm like, okay, we have grown men who are still wearing diapers in their mother's basements. And I'm like, this is the reality of being on social media. You're going to get the loudest people, the most annoying people that you're going to hear from. So as it relates to Tony Perkins, you're going to get this type of response, as vitriol, as ridiculous as it is. And I hope your nephew returns. I'm not going to put you on the spot and ask you if you think he's coming back. I'm guessing you're going to tell me, even if I did ask you that no final decision has been made. But I think he could really benefit from coming back. And I sure hope that any negative fan response that he's had over these last few weeks does not influence his career at Iowa.
Yeah, nothing can match the energy that Jordan Bohannon received throughout the years. Jordan Bohannon is a legend for Iowa, but rightfully so on social media, he was the biggest puppet as well. and he continued to keep his head up and play strong and ultimately won a Big Ten championship, So, and and that's for any, we're in a new era, Corey, with media and social media for these players. So, we're all 30. Corey, you're not 30, are you?
I'm getting close, but not quite. Getting close.
Anybody that's 30 plus, man, back in the day, if you heard some bad stuff, you heard it in person from somebody yelling from across the street. Nowadays, you can be sleeping in your bedroom and get a mention about, hey, you played terrible today, So we don't know how these kids are handling social media because we didn't have that growing up. So it's a different world.
Absolutely. And Tony, do you have anything else? I didn't want to cut you off.
I think he's not going to say it.
Whoa. Cutting teeth, Tony. Cutting teeth. I got to mute you. Cutting teeth. Hey, I know people on. Oh, he said he's good. He's done. All right. He's got to take care of some parental duties, so we respect that. Appreciate Tony
right
on into the show as always. But yeah, good stuff. And I did see that Tony was engaging with some people on social media over the last couple of days. Can I ask you, were there conversations that were had after that? Like, is that something that you as a uncle say, hey, simmer down? Or is that something that, hey, Jordan Bohannon, you brought him up. He engaged people on Twitter all the time. And I didn't like that personally, but hey, you are what you are. He's an adult. How do you react when you see Tony kind of going back and forth with some people who are criticizing him publicly?
I mean, it's just, you can't feed into the negativity, man. It's a rabbit hole. It's a lose-lose situation. And Corey, like you said, you made a comment on a player the other day, people were biting at you. When you entertain that negativity, it's just a rabbit hole. And I would tell Tony the same thing, like, man, don't entertain those people, man, because having a conversation back and forth with you will be the highlight of their day. You know what I'm saying? So don't be the butt of the joke. So, but I think Jordan Bohannon, if you know Jordan, man, he's a smooth operator, man. He knows what he's doing. His moves are very calculated. And I don't think anything fazed that kid, man. He's a strong kid. But yeah, Tony, I would just tell him, like, dude, don't entertain that. You got a lot bigger fish to fry. So
absolutely. All right, a couple things here before let me see if we've got our next. I believe we've got our next caller in line. Yeah, let's get our next caller. Before we do that, I mentioned RTI Threads earlier. I do have the Zach Lutmer shirt on. This young man is still part of the Iowa program, even though Caden Proctor appears to be leaving. I'll address that here in a few minutes. Even though this is a basketball show, it needs to be addressed. I did not publish content. I think I've stated here over the last few days that I've been enjoying a semi vacation. I'm not going to let the decision of a wishy-washy 20-year-old, 19-year-old kid disrupt my vacation that much. So, for the people that are upset that, why aren't you publishing content? Whatever. It is what it is. Caden Proctor is planning on entering the transfer portal. I can tell you that. I know it's been reported by anybody, everybody, and their mothers tonight, but that information I can tell you firsthand. So it is what it is. We'll address it here in a few minutes. Let's go back to our Iowa Smokehouse call-in line. We've got James on hold. James, welcome.
First off, I want to say something about Tony, and it's a good thing. It's nothing negative. For me, it's like he's playing out hard. Sometimes he's playing too hard in the fact of, like, he tries to do too much, but sometimes it's a good thing, right? Because you need that leadership out there, right? And yeah, his numbers aren't always reflecting, but like I told you before, Corey, as a coach, I understand that, like, numbers don't always reflect your impact, if that makes sense. Like, even if numbers aren't there, you're still impacting the game in different ways, right? And I think that's what people misread or don't understand, that, like, yeah, just because you go 4 for 12 or whatever you are, sometimes you're still impacting the game on defense. You can impact the game deflection balls to turn to steals, or, tipping a ball and a rebound that goes to somebody else. You don't get the credit for that, but you did it to get it to somebody else that got you the ball back, and then you get credit for those. So I think it's something that people don't look at the little things of basketball. They just focus on the stat line. It's like, that's not everything basketball has.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I think amen to that. Yes, sir. I think one thing he did do well in, I think, was it Tyler Perry's their leading scorer?
Yeah, it's one of the leading scorers.
Team. Yeah. Man, if you make your leader of the opposing team frustrated and flustered and he can't get his game really going, it's like, again, it's like the head of the snake. If you capture the head of the snake, everybody else will follow in line as well. And I think those type of metrics aren't measured unless you fully watch the game.
Yeah, for sure. And one thing I want to say too is like Cricky was a big in this game in the impact of Peyton had a really good first half, right? And then they face guarded him, and it's kind of hard when somebody face guards you. You have to know how to adjust, like especially him because he didn't get face guarded a lot for some reason. If I was teams, I'd face guard him, but he didn't get face guarded a lot for some reason because he goes 4-on-4, and in college it spreads him more out because you're going 4-on-4 and you got quicker guys sometimes, so it's kind of hard to go 4-on-4 with the speed and all that stuff. But like Cricky was big in the fact that he took over that kind of role that what Peyton was doing in the first half, he kind of did in the second half, and that kind of balanced it out and gave us the lead and kind of helped us keep the game afloat.
Yeah, and I think that's fair. Frank Ben has struggled latter part of the season. This team for that stretch where they kind of worked their way back in NCAA tournament consideration, wins at Michigan State, even that late win at Northwestern, even though the numbers from maybe Tony weren't great, you were getting contributions from Ben Cricky, you're getting contributions from Josh Dix. And I saw somebody in the chat here asking about Josh Dix. Is he hurt? I'm not aware of him being hurt. Now, I've got some thoughts on those guys' development and how they can take the next step forward. But Ben came up big, as James brought out, 24 points, 11 rebounds, 4 assists. They need him if they're going to be able to have success in this tournament. And here's a guy who, this is it. He ain't coming back next year. He didn't have eligibility like Tony if he wants to come back. So, for him to be coming up and showing out with 24 and 11, that's leadership, is it not?
No, I think that's awesome. I mean, again, back to Fred McCaffrey. I think we talked about this, Corey, about the very beginning of the season. I mean, to squeeze out the production that we've had this year and where we're at today, we really can't be mad about it. Because we really went to this season. I think you and I had a conversation way back in October and November when we first had our first couple of shows. We were just like, man, where is the points going to come from? Who's going to be the leader? It was so many unanswered questions. Now we're here and we just won our first NIT game. It's like, well, is it really that bad? If we look at the overall, statistics, So I think Ben did step up and was a huge contributor for us. He did start the season off great. He did have a midseason slump. But tonight he showed why we have him as a Hawkeye, So I think everybody just has their moment to shine. Ben has great games, Owen has great games, Peyton has great games, Tony has great games. That's just the make of Iowa basketball. We don't have, again, that true stud that's going to give you that 25 like a Keegan and a Chris. But overall, it's a good team.
Now, I felt like in the first half, one thing we kind of have been harping on, Corey, with this team.
Mm-hmm.
Defense. I felt like they played really good defense in the first half. I felt like the second half, maybe they got a little bit away from it and they kind of were giving up shots at some second chance opportunities. But in the first half, their defense was really good and really sounded compared to them. Maybe not compared to everybody else, but sound compared to what they've been playing or what they usually play. I guess if that makes sense.
Yeah.
For them, it was sound. And I felt like that kind of kept them in the game.
Relatively speaking, maybe. I mean, I still see so many holes with that defense.
Yeah. But it looked better than it has. In the first half, at least, it looked better than it has. The second half, they got away from them because they started hitting shots and getting second mid-chance opportunities. But
I'm not saying you're wrong. I just know it's got to be a lot better than it was. Honestly, what I was thinking throughout the game from a defensive perspective, James, is this is the tournament they belonged in. And that's no disrespect to players.
You're not wrong.
The inconsistencies, especially on the defensive end, the inconsistencies on the glass, that's the reason why they're in this tournament. And you know that. I mean, I'm not breaking any news to you.
The glass was big. I felt like we rebounded well too. And the Cricky, you have three, obviously Tony and all them can rebound too, but you have three guys you can really rely on. I feel like, especially Logi and Owen should be two names you really can rely on. And then obviously Ben can throw in rebounds there too. But I think this tournament, one thing this tournament's good about that we don't talk about, and I know you talk about, Iowa's one of them schools that they really don't have, and knock on wood, hopefully, we don't really have a lot of guys that usually transfer out, right? Especially those young guys. I think they're here to stay at least one more year, or hopefully longer than that, right? So, it's good for them to get that experience like Logi and Owen, just to get more experience, more playing time. Then, if we opted out, they wouldn't get this chance to play. They wouldn't get those more reps against other teams and different teams to get them more opportunities to be on the floor. And for growth, that's what you need. For growth and development, to get chances to get on the floor.
Yeah. I appreciate it, James. And we'll keep riding this train. Let's hope it's a run here through the postseason.
Yeah, for sure. And we'll see what happens on Friday. Hopefully we take care of business like we should for the women. And I don't know when we play next, but Utah's up 6.5. So
okay. Sounds good, sir.
Yep. Talk to you later.
Jen in the chat. Franklin, please tell Tony to stay one more year. Emphasis on the please, Frank. So be sure you listen to Jen. She's one of our premium subscribers. So
yeah,
thank you, Jen. I'm sure Frank will relay that message on. And
I will, Jen. I will ask Tony. But again, we'll see how the year is and see what he's thinking. But I'll definitely reach out to him, Jen, for you. I'll let him know Jen asked too. So
there you go. Okay, and then let's see. Sean, appreciate you being here. Carrie, thank you for being here as well. I see a lot of people reacting to the Caden Proctor news. And again, we'll address that here in a little bit, but our main priority is the Iowa men and their victory this evening. We've got our phone line open. If you want to call, 515-635-1601. You can also call our Iowa Smokehouse line by means of StreamYard. The link is in our description. I'll also throw it up in the live chat. Let's go back to that Iowa Smokehouse call line. We've got another one of our regular callers. Ryan, or as they say in some cultures, Bert. Right, Bert? No, I'm sorry. You're Ryan. How you doing, Ryan?
I thought it was Slambert.
Slambert. I associate you with Brett Bielema now. So.
Oh, jeez, please don't.
Go ahead.
I hit the treadmill an hour a day. Please don't. Anyway, I digress. Just a few thoughts. First of all, thank you, Mr. Henderson, for being here and taking the time.
No problem.
Always enjoy it when you're on. Great insight. My message for you to relay to Tony is I'm one of many Hawkeye fans that just flat out appreciate him and what he has done for this program. He's really developed into a great point guard, a great on-ball defender, probably the best on-ball defender we had in probably a decade. I would say Anthony Clemens was the last real good on-ball defender we had. And kind of as you alluded to in James's call, you kind of have to watch the game. I can read the box score without watching the game and say, oh, wow, Peyton Sandfort, 7 threes, 12 rebounds, 30 points. Ben Crickey, double-double, 20 – what did he have? 24 and 11. So you can attribute it that way. I will say, if you watch the game, what is beautiful about Tony is even when he's not shooting the lights out per se, he stopped a really, really good Big 12 guard averaging 15 and a half a game to 2 of 13 shooting, 8 assists. I mean, I really, really hope I put it in the chat, in fact, that Tony is our number right there. Thank you, Corey. Tony is the top recruit for next year.
I agree.
I think, I mean, eventually pretty soon we're going to be talking about, all right, who are transfer portal targets? I think you got to look at a legitimate 4, obviously. Assuming, that the Sandforts come back and what have you, Laji comes back, you still need, they're a little more 2s and 3s. You need a legitimate 4, and I'm a big guy on Brock Harding, who only played 3 minutes tonight. Tony played 38, and I'm not against that. Tony needed to be out there for the very reasons that I said. I hope we don't have to look at a transfer portal 1. I want that to be Tony. He was phenomenal. And again, when he's not shooting great, that doesn't mean he didn't play great. And I thought he played great.
Yeah, thank you.
And Kansas State, let's not forget, Jerome Tang is one of the best recruiters out there. He really, really always gets great athletes. Obviously, I'm always concerned about. I'm concerned about the fact that we're never real tight in the paint, but that was a very entertaining game, I thought. What are your thoughts?
I think the game overall was definitely entertaining. I just think from the get-go, they came out with the tenacity that they want to win. And I alluded to this earlier in the conversation that these guys like each other. They like playing for one another. You know what I mean? You can tell there's really not a selfishness on the team. We don't really have in the past, I would say for me watching Iowa basketball the past 4 or 5 years, we haven't had too many selfish players come across the program. You know,
No,
I think Fran doesn't allow that for one. And two, to Corey's point, again, the culture of Iowa basketball is, we win together, we lose together. So that's always going to be the impact and impression they leave after each and every game. But no, the game was awesome. Again, to shut down Kansas State was awesome to see. Another Big 12 team. But again, I just think they kind of underestimated Iowa basketball. And that's the funny thing about NIT and NCAA tournament is that we're playing these cross-conference teams that just played the past 15 games in their own conference, so they stick to what they used to. They stick to, how the conference typically plays offensively and defensively. We were on tonight with our shooting from Peyton Sandfort. They might not see that type of shooting in the Big 12, so it was an adjustment for both ends, But we just got the best of them tonight. Kansas State's still a really great program. They're going to continue to grow, continue to be a problem in the future. But again, I just think Iowa just came out with tenacity that, hey, our season's not done. Keep the ball rolling.
well said. Well said. Yeah, I hope Tony knows how appreciated he is, and if he does move on one way or another, we will look back at him as one of the real great guards that we've had in modern times for sure. Hopefully, and I wanted to be in the dance, but hopefully this gives us an opportunity to have a little more entertainment as we go on. Hopefully the holes we have get filled. When I looked at this team, you kept thinking tonight, how did we lose to Michigan? How did we lose twice to Maryland? And you take those bad losses out, we may have actually made it. But when I look at on paper, now you might disagree with me, Corey, you might disagree with me, but I thought on paper we were at least a 7 to a 10 seed, somewhere in there. I thought we were good enough on paper to get that. And then, yes, that's my other comment. Fran guys are never problems. You don't read about them in the newspaper unless it's about their performance in the game.
Right.
And I think that goes an awful long way. Fran recruits high character guys. So that's my thoughts. And again, thank you both very much. And it gives us a little bit of hope in light of the gut punch that we all took late this afternoon. Thanks, guys.
Thank you, Ryan. Appreciate it, sir. And I know, again, it's easy to see the negativity, and not that Tony cares too much about people in the chat on this show, but do me a favor, Frank. Let Tony see some of these comments that have been fed through the chat.
I don't think the comments really bother him. He knows Iowa loves him. He loves Iowa. I love Iowa as well. I mean, I've been there so many times, Corey. It's truly like my second home. When I get to Iowa City, I feel comfortable. I feel like I belong here. I feel like we love it here. I mean, it's a great city, man. It's very charming. We love it. He knows. He feels it. He feels the love in the air. I think that little back and forth was just I don't know what that was, but
letting off some steam.
Yeah, let off some steam because that's the first time he's ever done that. You know what I mean? Yep. He's not a back and forth kid. And if anybody knows Tony personally, he's a very low maintenance guy.
Yeah.
He's not gonna talk too much. He's not gonna, due to much reactions, but I mean, I think he was just blowing some steam because he knows, like you and I talked about, that he needs to kind of like pick himself up at times during the games. But overall, he loves Iowa, man. There's no bad blood with Iowa at all.
Stewart says that it was mentioned on the air, and I didn't catch this, but Tony hurt his wrist a couple weeks ago. Is that accurate, or was that earlier in the process, Frank?
He did. He hurt his wrist several games ago. I know the Northwestern game was a big issue because I think that's when he initially was having the most agony with it, was Northwestern. And he's been dealing with this issue for the past 5 or 6 games. So there could be a reason for his slump, but me being, hard-nosed uncle, I'm always like, dude, play through it, next play, and he tries. But yes, he's had a wrist injury for the past, several games.
But again, share these comments with him. Kerry, TP is my favorite player. Obvious talent, will have excellent opportunities after being a Hawkeye. Louis says, I sure hope Tony comes back. LFG, he has the toughest job. He's getting his own points and elevating others and defending. Of course, he's their primary, I think their best defender. And then Ryan, yes, Tony is the top priority, should be the top priority, him and Peyton Sandfort as far as recruiting. And again, we mentioned this one from Jen about wanting Tony to come back. Vincent says, key point you've both made, it's the culture of Iowa basketball. It's becoming more and more rare in college hoops, which is why so many Hawk fans are proud of the program. Now, he adds, Peyton Sandfort being on the NBA radar, how much validity do we have on that? I'm not a guy who scours mock drafts, Frank, and I know you mentioned earlier his ability to knock down the three is what's going to make him most attractive to NBA scouts. But you still have to be able to defend to some extent. I mean, the easy comparison that people make is Duncan Robinson. And Duncan Robinson turned into at least a decent defender at the next level. I don't think Peyton's even a decent defender. And that's no disrespect to Peyton. I like Peyton Sandfort, but not very quick laterally. I'm just being objective here. He's long. He's got some good length. Again, he rebounds better than he ever has. And I'm not saying he hasn't gotten better in some ways, better shot blocker, but where do you think his draft stock is right now? I know you're not a scout, but where do you think he's a second-round pick if he declares?
You know what? To better answer that question, I could be very bland and say, hey, whatever team needs, they're going to pick what they need. I'm not going to say he's a first or second round. I'm going to just say Peyton has the ability to really extend his career in basketball, wherever that goes, whether that's the NBA, whether that's overseas, defense is something that might not be his strong point, but shooting threes consistently is a lot of people's not strong point. Some people don't have 3-point capabilities at all. So I think we need to focus on, not saying you and I, but I just think scouts are probably going to focus on what is he really good at and worry less about what he's not good at. Will he be a potential NBA starter? God only knows that question. Will he be a future Hall of Famer? God only knows that question. I just know right now for Iowa basketball, he's what we need as far as, getting some of these W's. But again, I don't really follow too many scout reports. I mean, they're a good measure to kind of see. But at the end of the year, I don't know how many people know this, but at the end of the year, the NBA has an evaluation form that they give to each player who's considering going into the professional stance. If you're a top player, top 3, 4, 5 player on the team, you let your head coach know, say, hey, I'm thinking about, going pro, where do I stand? He sends a message to the NBA. One of the commissioners will send you back a report of letting you know your predictability or probability of where you would go in the draft. I.e., for example, Corey, me and you are the best backcourt in college basketball, and Corey's like, I'm thinking about going to the league, coach. You'll get a report saying, hey, Corey, you're predicted to go mid first round, early second round. Hey, Frank, you're predicted to go early second round, mid second round. That gives you an indication of a better indication than the scouting report will give you, because these are what GMs are predicting collectively that you will go in the draft. So I think Payne's going to do that this summer, which all players should do, whether you go to the NBA or not. Tony will definitely, consider getting a report to see where he stands. And that, if a lot of people don't know that is a standing factor, which determines a lot of players going pro, in the portal, or staying another year in college.
How about Tyler? NBA comparison to Marcus Smart. Interesting. Here's what I'll say about that, Frank. with all due respect to Tony,
Right.
let's give Marcus Smart his due. Marcus Smart is a dog.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying Tony ain't no dog, but he's got a ways to go to achieve that level of dogness.
Yeah.
Like,
and you know what's funny? He can be. And again, I wish I was a fly on the wall, Corey, because again, the Tony Perkins I know was a dog on both ends of the floor. He's shown flashes of getting those 25-point games or 20-point games when he did like 8 games in a row. But the Tony I know from high school and prior, I mean, he did that every single game. So it's always about the language in which you coach your players to be. We talk about culture, but what is the actual culture? You know, if I have a top player and let's say he's not the best shooter, I'm not going to tell certain players, my best player, that's not a good shot. I'm not going to tell my best player, oh, maybe you should kick it to what's the name. I tell all my players, if the shot is there, take it.
yeah.
If it's there, take the shot. You know what I mean? Because typically, you know, statistically, if you look at it, the team who shoots the most shots typically wins the game. You know, who gets the most field goal attempts, statistically. So again, I don't know what's being said in the locker rooms, but he can be that. He will be that. You know, so I don't know.
To finish off our show, we've hit the hour mark, and I want to wrap this up. I do want to give people a quick dialogue on the Caden Proctor situation, and I also want to give a quick rundown of, after watching this game, and now that we're in postseason play, not that this tournament doesn't matter, because it does, and you can tell by the way these guys are playing that it matters. I want to kind of give some preliminary thoughts on where I can see some serious growth with this roster heading into 2024. Again, we're talking Iowa's 91-78 win over Kansas State. I want to remind everybody that we've got this partnership with the new Autograph app. This is an app co-founded by the legendary Tom Brady himself. It's your one-stop shop for everything college sports, access to all the best sports content, exciting fan challenges, exclusive rewards. They've got these crazy discounts on tickets. They've been giving away, hooking up fans with $16 tickets with their true fan pricing. If you're ready to join the party, download the free Autograph app today and use the code FTHOTS. It's from the Hawkeye of the Storm, FTHOTS, for exclusive access. All right, you're getting early exclusive access. Search the App Store, Google Play for Autograph Fandom Rewarded, or you can just click the link in our description. Again, Autograph app, co-founded by the legendary Tom Brady himself. Use the code FTHOTS for exclusive access. All right. Our RTI Threads player of the game, mentioned this earlier, but this guy has been really good at a really good time. And Gary Close said the other night, talking about that loss to Ohio State, Peyton Sandfort seems to just be one heck of a teammate. And I know he's got to be down in the dumps about not helping this team to the NCAA tournament, but he seems to be a really likable leader. And I really do think, Frank, and not to harp on this whole Tony returning thing, but if Tony and Peyton come back, I think they need to do some work in the transfer portal. But along with that, I want to just kind of give my thoughts real quickly on some developmental things with this team. This is a 4-freshman class that we're watching this year with Dembele, Freeman, Harding, and Price. And so I'll stay away from that a little bit because they're freshmen and they're going to develop. But here's what I'd like to see out of some of these other guys that are older, that I think may be the underlying key to taking this team not only to the NCAA tournament, but giving them a good seed where they could potentially make the second weekend next year. And I think that's absolutely plausible that they can make that jump with this roster. And I'll start with Tony. One thing I'd like to see from Tony is I'd like to see Tony dedicate himself to the defensive end. And I'm not saying that he doesn't play hard defensively, but you know what I mean, Frank. Like Josh Dix, there were times where Josh Dix was the guy on the best opposing player this year. And I'm sure that's ultimately a coach's decision, but I want Tony to do everything he can to make that abundantly clear that I am the guy in that moment. And that's going to help him obviously the next level. You want him to be able to make threes more consistently. We've discussed that. But I think his ability to do what we talked about earlier in reference to Marcus Smart has made his living in the league on the defensive end. And you don't got to be a dirty player. And I don't know that Marcus Smart's a dirty player, but I do think Tony's got the ability physically to do that. So I'd like to see him really dedicate himself to the defensive end and on-ball defense. You look at Josh Dix, really came on strong this year. He's got to develop more comfortability going outside of the mid-range. It seems like he really feasted on the mid-range jumper, that fadeaway, throughout the midway part of the Big Ten season. And it stopped falling at times. And I think that started to get scouted, and he's got to be a little bit more comfortable, I think, getting to the rim, finishing around the rim. He has the ability to do that. We've seen him stop, pop, make threes, get to the rim and score. I think he settled for the mid-range maybe a little bit too much. So that's one thing I'd like to see out of him. And then Owen Freeman, I know he's a freshman. I said I'd kind of stay away from the freshman, but he has struggled to finish around the rim. Obviously, free throw shooting has to get better. Same thing with Logic.
Yeah.
Fouls way too much. He misses a shot, immediately goes over the back. Those are freshman mistakes. I get it. Verticality has been an issue defensively all year for this team. And some of that is inexperience. Peyton, I think, still jacks up bad shots at times. I don't know that will change because that's kind of his game. Am I missing anything in there? Am I wrong on anything, Tony? Or Frank?
No, I would just add on to say this. We really needed a strong 3 this year. What I mean by that is we needed a strong 6'6", 6'7" guy that can play the wing and sometimes push the ball off the court. We have a guy that's on there now, but he's kind of dealt with some mental health issues and some other eluding injuries. But I just think if we had another 6'6", 6'7" guard forward present somewhere that can play the 3, who might get a few, slash and dunks, tip ins here and there. I was predicated to a 6'3", 6'4" guard and a 6'9", 6'10" big. We don't really have that in-betweener that's gonna, we can switch a 6'7" guy on a Tyler Perry and guard him the rest of the game. We don't have that 6'8", 6'7" guy, the guy to guard what's the guy's name from Wisconsin? A Store?
Yeah, Store.
A Store. We needed an in-betweener guy like that 6'6", 6'7", athletic to defend, be a beast around the rim, knocking a couple threes. If we had a stronger presence in that space, I think would have been a little bit further than what we are today.
They do get Chris Taggio, the NBA Academy kid, in next year, along with Cooper Koch. Skilled guy. I think Taggio's got maybe the level of that gear of athleticism that they could use. But I think the portal is just going to be an every year thing. I don't know what the future for Dasonte Bowen is. He's not a 3. But, I mean, as it relates to just having his services in the backcourt, I know he's out for the year with an injury. You hope he comes back, but his minutes were kind of dwindling when he got hurt anyways. So those are all questions, but I think you hit the nail on the head with several of those. And Price is a 3.
I will make this one comment. I might get some flack for it, but I will make this one comment. No slight to Fran and what Iowa has to offer. Just my experience watching Iowa basketball, his offense is predicated to offensive shooting threes and jumpers. I watch his offense from a coach's eye because it's just something I just do naturally. Your offense doesn't predicate to driving lanes. It doesn't predicate to an athletic wing who might not have the best jumper, but he can get a layup. It doesn't predicate to that type of game. So sometimes when you do get those certain type of players in, like a Dasonte Bowen or a Aaron Eulis or even my nephew Tony Perkins, they're not the best outside shooters, but at the same time, you have to predicate an offense to exploit the reason why you recruited them. In Tucson. So you recruit players because you feel like that's what's missing in your offense, but you never change your offense to exploit the players that you recruited, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
So you have to understand a player's game and what they bring to the table, but allow a type of efficiency to give them what you recruit them for in the first place. I can't run motion with 5 offensive shooters and oh man, we don't have a guy that can drive in there. He gets in there, run the same motion. It's not going to work for his type of game. And players, and I don't think too many players at that age of 18, 19 see that. But over the years of watching Iowa basketball, That's one thing I would critique Fran on. It's like I don't think the offense predicates to the type of guy that you actually want on your team and allow flexibility to do that. You know.
And I think there's validity to what you just said, and to take it a step further, that would lend itself to make me believe that Tony has, in a sense, overachieved, because Joe Toussaint, what ended up happening? He left and ended up having a pretty good career, a couple different places. DeSante Bowen's not playing. I know he's young. Hope he comes back. Aaron Eulis transfers out. I know he's not playing at Nebraska due to other issues, but Tony Perkins, your nephew, is maybe one of the exceptions. So I think that's valid criticism. And
yeah, imagine Aaron Eulis still at Iowa and Joe Toussaint. Like I said earlier about the culture of the team. If my game is predicated on driving the basketball and getting a layup or driving and dishing, in the very few times I do shoot the ball because that's what your offense allows us to do, and you tell me, Corey, like, hey, don't take that shot or that's a bad shot, swing it to this kid and this kid because I recruited him to be our shooter, you're taking away confidence from that player because, again, he's battling a double-edged sword. I can't get the flexibility I want to as far as getting in the paint to score. And also you're telling me that the shots I do take aren't the best shots for our team. So where do I fit in this system?
Yeah. And the recruiting priorities have heavily been on what you've talked about. Skilled guys who can score in a variety of ways, but it is predicated on having really good shooters. And they shot less threes this year. I give Fran credit for making some adjustments this year. They've really feasted on the mid-range with Ben and Josh and with Tony, and that is a positive thing. But I agree, and they've struggled in the portal. I think that's part of. I just think that's part of the problem. They've struggled in the portal. They had an opportunity to get a couple of really athletic guys in the portal this past cycle, Frank, and they weren't able to grab them. And no offense to Ben Krikke, but totally different kind of player than a Jordan Minor, right? Or the other kid who went. Where did the other kid go? Like, they had athletic bigs on their radar.
Yeah,
it is what it is. So I think fans should be. They got guys with upside, like I say, with Dembele and with Freeman and with Dix, and I think those guys, all of those guys, have flashed really strongly. And I'm not a coach, I'm not a developmental guy or a scout, but some of those things are almost all those things we talked about earlier, very fixable. And some of those things are just comfort level. And I do think this team can be really good. Roster retention is going to be huge.
Yep.
Some of the programs like St. John's, Indiana, et cetera, are focusing on, hey, how can we take advantage of the guys from other schools generating the portal? Fran's biggest thing right now, taking the approach he's taking, how many games can we win in this tournament? And then how many guys can I retain? You're going to lose somebody. That's just the nature of the game.
I have a question for you before we end the show.
Sure.
When it comes to recruiting in the portal, let's go back in time, Corey. We're a 17-year-old kid. If you have an opportunity to go to Iowa or Ohio State, but you're an Iowa native, so you might choose Iowa. I used to joke with Caden Proctor about this when I used to go to the men's games about 2 years ago. Kids are very impressionable by what they see and what the school demonstrates and how the environment impacts them. What I mean by is exciting to come here. Am I excited to be a Hawkeye? Because if you think about the recruiting class that Fran had with Tony, Keegan, Chris, Josh, a lot of those guys, Iowa was their only high major offer. So, not to discredit Fran's capability to recognize talent, but if they had another exciting offer, would have Iowa been their choice? I.e., the Big Ten pushing Iowa basketball. So, what I'm saying is, I think if there was a little bit more of a culture shift and things were more appealing, just from the culture standpoint, maybe some coaches who, and I think Coach Terrence Spur and the other coach who came back, the assistant coaches, they do a great job of recruiting those young guys. I think just the fan base at Iowa is great. They can bring in the crowd and bring in the numbers. I just think just the excitement could be better, and you could have more of those top recruits come into Iowa, and we have fans fill those seats. But you've been to the Iowa game, and this is no shade to Iowa. I'm just my thoughts,
Well, part of the problem is that they've got to figure out a way to get more fans there. And I know people say if you win games, fans will come. That's true to an extent. To an extent, that's absolutely true. Part of the problem is they haven't made a Sweet 16 in 25 years.
Yeah,
that is part of the problem.
Yeah.
But another part of the problem is move the students, figure out a better way to accommodate older people. Like there are, especially the student body, I think that's the biggest problem. There are issues with the arena, and you hope that Beth Getz, as the new AD, fixes those things. But those things aren't fixed overnight. And so, I mean, it's a collective issue.
It is. It's a collective issue. I'm not saying I'm not pointing any fingers, but I've been to the Iowa game several times, Corey, and I've yawned at the game.
Yeah.
I'm like,
I mean, you saw the crowd tonight. I get it's the NIT, but you saw that crowd tonight. Like, nobody there behind the baskets.
Yeah, I've yawned at the game. I'm like, where is the entertainment? I mean, I don't know what they do. I'm not pointing any fingers, but I've been to O State, I've been to Michigan, I've been to Michigan State. They have a live DJ, they have a live announcer, they throw T-shirts in the crowd. It's just a different atmosphere.
Totally different experience. Absolutely, 100%. And I talked about that earlier this year, going over to Omaha to CHI Arena. Like that great atmosphere is crazy. Like that atmosphere is crazy. I go to Hilton every year. That atmosphere is crazy. I live in Ames. It's top notch. One of the, like Creighton, Iowa State, two of the best environments in college basketball right there.
Mm-hmm.
And, went to Ohio State, and it was pretty much a packed house, but still not the same. It's just a totally different thing. So I think there's some things happening behind the scenes that should help the cause.
Yeah.
But I absolutely agree. It's not a real.
It's a collective. It's a collective. So just my thoughts on if we want to get those type of players, again, put yourself in the mindset of a 17-year-old, 18-year-old kid.
Be sure to check out Iowa Smokehouse, folks, for the best tasting out there, best snacking and tasting. Tasting is believing is their slogan, and find out how that's true. Visit iowasmokehouse.com. Get your shipment sent right to your doorstep. Use the code Hawkeyes for 15% off your order. Again, that's the code Hawkeyes at iowasmokehouse.com for 15% off your total order. Meat sticks, jerky, steak bites, barbecue sauces, everything is delicious. And they're sponsoring our post-game coverage for Hawkeye sports throughout the spring. Again, iowasmokehouse.com. Use the code Hawkeyes for 15% off your order. And if you missed the announcement earlier, for the second straight year, we've got a special bracket challenge brought to you by Iowa Smokehouse. So be sure to enter that before Thursday morning. Get your brackets in. It's a locked challenge, which means you have to have your selections made before Thursday morning, before, 11 a.m. Central Time tip for the first March Madness games on Thursday. Men's and women's bracket challenge links in the description. So stay tuned for information on prizes, but enter our Iowa Smokehouse bracket challenges on ESPN in our description. There are links to both the men's and the women's challenges. Both of those groups are labeled from the Hawkeye of the Storm. One is men's basketball, one is women's basketball. Again, enter our Iowa Smokehouse bracket challenge today. Want to thank RTI Threads. I've got the RTI Threads gear on, the Zach Lutmer gear. They've got Iowa baseball apparel up on their site, iowabaseballswarm.com. You can also check out their player apparel over at www.rtithreads.com. Support this great company that's doing everything it can to support this show, Iowa baseball, Iowa athletics, and the NIL costs for so many loyal Iowa athletes. Again, iowabaseballswarm.com and rtithreads.com. All right, final thing I want to hit on, and I know this has nothing to do with you, Frank, but we have to address it because I have not produced content. I am on a bit of a vacation right now, although the work never stops, especially during March Madness. But this caught a lot of people off guard earlier today. Rumors started to swirl. Reports started to come out. I think this all started on a message board, was the first place that I was made aware. I'm not members of message boards, but somebody sent me a screenshot of a message board comment regarding former 5-star offensive tackle Caden Proctor, who, of course, if anybody doesn't know who we're talking about, you're probably living in a hole as it relates to Iowa football. Here's a kid who 5-star recruit from Des Moines, ends up committing to Iowa, takes a bunch of other visits, ends up decommitting from Iowa a day before signing day during the 2020, that'd be the 2023 cycle. Then he goes to Bama, plays a full year as a starter at left tackle, which is really hard to do. at any level, D1 level, but certainly in the SEC at Bama. And then what happens? Nick Saban retires. He re-enters the portal. And I was told from the get-go, before he even entered the portal, that he was coming to Iowa. He absolutely followed through with what we expected him to do. He travels to Iowa, commits basically on the spot, committed before he got there. And looked like everything was ship-shape. He's got his good buddy Xavier Wampa there, former Southeast Polk standout himself. And now a couple months go by, and the reports this morning or this afternoon were that Caden Proctor might be re-entering the transfer portal, and that just, again, put a lot of people in a state of panic and shock, and understandably so. And it was not long before reports came out regarding Caden Proctor making some comments to some media outlets that, yes, he is planning on entering the transfer portal this spring. And prior to those official reports coming out, I think Scott Docterman of The Athletic was the first to officially report it. I reached out to somebody in the Caden Proctor circle, and this source told me, yes, Caden is planning on re-entering the transfer portal. And that's all I got from my source. But then there were other reports circulating this afternoon that he is planning on heading back to Alabama. I don't really know what to say on this. I know people in the comments were like, hey, what's Corey? How angry is Corey going to be? I'm not angry. And I'll tell you what, I have been very forgiving to Caden Proctor. Not that he owes me anything. He doesn't owe any of us anything. Now, if you donated to the Swarm and you're upset because you think your money's going to be wasted, I get it. I get being mad. I totally understand it. All right. From my perspective, somebody who operates this show, someone who knows people in the Caden Proctor circle, I'm not upset. I'm just kind of like, I'm done. I'm done worrying about where this 19-year-old kid goes. He has made 4 different decisions in the course of like a year and a half. He commits to Iowa, then he decommits and goes to Alabama. Then he enters the portal, goes to Iowa. Now he's going back to Alabama. At some point, like, I'm washing my hands. I'm not messing with the kid anymore. And Frank, I know you're not necessarily a Hawkeye football fan, but you understand college recruiting. You know where the transfer portal is. We don't know what happened to lead Caden Proctor to this decision. Is somebody giving him bad advice? I think that's absolutely possible. That's absolutely possible. In fact, it's probably probable, no pun intended. But it also might just be a result of money, and money that was maybe not on the table a couple of months ago that's on the table now. And as a 19-year-old has a hard time declining that type of money to return back to Alabama, maybe it's something that happened with a coach or coaches or players. But
you hit the nail on the head. It's money.
I mean, that's what we think. That's what it looks like, right? That's what it looks like.
Yeah,
right?
look, you gotta have a little both. You gotta be a little book smart and a little street smart, Corey. It sounds like money is the issue.
Yeah.
If somebody's switching plans like that, money's involved.
Absolutely. No, I was a little bit hesitant to jump on that boat the first time around when he decommitted and went to Alabama. Because here's the deal, Frank. Until you sign on the dotted line, it's like being engaged. Like, you're not married until you're married. So he decided to leave. And if it came down to money and NIL, it came down to money and NIL. It sucks. But at the same time, it was wise on Iowa's part not to burn those bridges and allow him to come back into the fold when he was ready. But at this point, regardless of how much money was dedicated to him via Swarm or private deals, he's gone now. I ain't recruiting this kid no more. He's done. Like and he ain't coming.
That's fine. That's fair.
Iowa, anyways.
That's fair. I mean, that's just the day and age that we're in. It's a crapshoot. It's a money game. It's a recruiting game. It's a lot of factors that play into it. But again, I don't know the family's background. I don't know where he comes from. But I mean, hey, if you tell a kid saying, hey, you can play for Iowa for X amount, or you can play for Alabama for a bigger X amount. Come on, it's hard to knock that,
I can tell you the source that I reached out to this afternoon, again, confirmed to me that he absolutely is planning on leaving. And the source would not give me a reason, an explanation as to why. But I also don't expect not to assume this, but I think, Frank, you said it. I also don't expect somebody in Caden's camp to say, yeah, it's about money. They offered him more money. Like, technically, that's against the rules. You can't be doing that. But it's happening all the time. And it's a microcosm of where the sport is. I know Nick Saban has expressed frustrations. How about the irony of that, Frank? The fact that Nick Saban has been on the record the last few weeks basically dogging on the state of the game and on NIL and how you have to recruit. And his own program, who now is being led by former Washington coach Kalen DeBoer, is the program that it looks like has poached Caden Proctor back home.
Right.
And yet there is no regulations. There are no regulations. And I am concerned about the direction of the sport. Not that I wasn't concerned before, but this is absolutely ridiculous. And for people who, I know there were people who were angry at me when this occurred. I don't quite get that line of reasoning. Why be angry at someone else? Like, you can be angry at Caden Proctor, but at the same time, like, it's football, let it go. If you dedicated money to the Swarm and the Swarm's not getting this money back, and I don't have insight into that. I've not had a conversation with Brad Heinrichs since this news broke, and I don't know how much of his NIL stuff, whatever he was promised through NIL or agreed upon, was directly tied to the Swarm versus just private deals. I don't have the answer to that. But if people have given money with the expectation that Caden Proctor was going to be playing at Iowa, that's extremely unfortunate, and that stinks. And that's part of the problem with how this is set up, because technically speaking, you cannot pay players to play. So there's nothing preventing something like this from happening, from a kid coming to campus, never playing, collecting that moolah, maybe fulfilling a couple of fundraising obligations or advertising obligations, and then heading on out. If that's what happened with Caden Proctor, it's extremely unfortunate and is yet another demonstration of the change that needs to happen with college athletics right now. But I am disappointed in Caden Proctor, but at the same time, I'm just I didn't even want to talk about it. Like, if I didn't do this live stream this evening, I probably wouldn't have even addressed it, because I am worn out talking about this young man who can't seem to be. I am.
I know you are, Corey. I know you are.
Anyways, we've got one final caller. We'll make this quick. I know we both, Frank, you're in the Eastern time zone. You want to get to bed. We're going to take a quick call from our Iowa Smokehouse call-in line. Thank you for calling Iowa Postgame with special guest Frank Henderson, who's on the line.
Corey, this is Randy Hanson.
Hey, Randy.
Hey, I've been watching this, and I'll be really brief, but this is just something that I've seen this train wreck coming, ever since I really became aware of the Swarm and all these other colleges, that are putting out the money for these student athletes. It's like right now, college sports is headed for a disastrous, going right over the cliff. Nobody in charge. They're just going to sit here and let this train wreck happen. I don't get it, but this is just a perfect example. They're all out the money. You have no contract. The athlete collects the money and walks. Not a dang thing anybody can do about it.
Yeah.
And right now, this is like going back to the NFL and all the other, with no salary cap. Anybody can spend anything they want. Nobody's protected. And yeah, this is a really unfortunate situation, but this is what's going to end up happening in college sports. The IRS is going to get involved. Law enforcement's going to get involved. There's going to be all kinds of investigations. I mean, this thing's just going to blow up and screw college sports for a long time. Nobody's doing anything about it. There's no leadership. All we can do is sit here. Everybody can see this train wreck, and nobody's doing anything about it. I think college sports is going to have to go through some serious problems before somebody steps up and corrects itself. And the politicians are going to be the ones that end up doing it. And it's mind-boggling how everybody can sit there, watch this train wreck happen, and not do anything about it. I mean, what does Brett think about this? I mean, he's a victim. I mean, this guy's stepped up. He's a hero for Iowa. These guys are victims to this stuff.
Well, I don't know that Brad Heinrichs is the victim. I think the people who, if he indeed was able to, based on the scuttlebutt, benefit from the Swarm collective and then leave, I don't feel for Brad Heinrichs. I feel for, and he's doing it. He's not making money off of it. What I'm saying is I feel for all the fans out there that did give their hard-earned money to the Swarm. And that would probably include Brad Heinrichs, but I'm just saying everybody as a whole. And I just think it's unfortunate for the fan base as a whole. And I absolutely agree with you, Randy. There's going to be, I don't know where this is headed. This is a national story today. So just so people are aware, like this is not just a big story in Iowa. This is a national story, and it's groundbreaking. And I even told my source, I said earlier today, I said, he ain't going to ever live this down now. Like what he did a year and a half ago, it is what it is. He is never going to feel welcome in Iowa again. And that's unfortunate. But, man, you're right. It's a wild, wild west, and there's nothing stopping it right now.
Well, okay, and you're right. I mean, people like me or you or anybody else giving money to the Swarm, and then the Swarm's making informed decisions, and then a deal like this happens. This is an individual, isolated deal. This guy's a rat for doing what he did. But I'm just talking to the overall picture.
Yeah.
I don't see how college sports can possibly survive this. And is there just not anybody like a Big Ten commissioner? Can't these people get together and say, hey, we're about to watch something that's great get screwed up, and are we just going to sit here on our thumbs and let it happen?
Well,
It's just my...
Randy, blame the NCAA on this, because the NCAA, we've said it before, they allowed the situation to get to a point where the Supreme Court had to step in and rule on things. And the way they ruled has put the NCAA, not that they're capable of making good decisions on this anyways, but yeah, I think it's very hard for anybody to step in and intervene in this situation. I don't know what the solution is.
Mm-hmm.
Well, at some point, there's going to have to be contracts. There's going to have to be almost a salary cap. But, I'm just telling you, when lawsuits and the IRS, I mean, they're going to start tracking this money. I mean, they're not going to let this, they're not going to not collect their taxes. That's just not going to happen. And the IRS is way too powerful as it is, but man, that's a lot of money floating around the college. And that money, and all that money is going to be very suspicious in the minds of law enforcement. And I don't see how that's good for college football.
Yeah, I agree.
Football, college sport. Because like right now, it's just, man, you got women's basketball coming along. Football, it's just so great of a deal, college football. And then this comes along. And nobody will step up to regulate it. But anyways, that's just my 2 cents.
Randy, we'll talk more about this very, very soon, I promise. I appreciate you calling in, sir.
All right, brother.
Thank you, sir. Yeah, I think Randy encapsulates of what a lot of people are feeling right now. Not just, I mean, this is happening to Iowa, but it's happening other places, maybe not to this extent yet, but it's going to continue to happen. I agree with him on that. So
yeah, I agree with Randy as well. But I mean, I and this is just me. I do feel for the Iowa fans who did give their hard-earned money to the Swarm to get these high-caliber players. But it is the Wild Wild West, and that's the games that we do play in the climate of college football and college basketball. But I can't necessarily blame the kid 100%, because whatever that was spoken to that kid, Iowa should have protected themselves as far as verbiage. I do know firsthand other players that I deal with outside of my nephew who are getting NIL deals and so forth. There's verbiage in those deals.
what do you mean by there's verbiage?
Some schools are like, in order to get this money, you have to be enrolled August 1st at this school. In order to receive this X amount, you must play at least 3 or 4 games. Like there's verbiages.
But I don't.
In that.
My understanding of this, Frank, and I'm not working with the Swarm firsthand, but because it can't be pay for play, you can't have verbiage or stipulations that involve playing.
But do we always follow the rules?
Well, no.
Let's talk about college in general. Has the rules always been followed 100%? Because before NIL, there was NIL somewhere.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I agree. And we don't know. By the way, the Swarm has not. Iowa's not come out. The Swarm has not come out and said Proctor took the money and ran. We don't know that. Like that's out there.
We don't know, but I do know firsthand from other players, close family people that I deal with, friends of, kids who got sons and daughters that play sports. They've said, hey, they're not going to collect, or however they put it, they're not going to receive their first disbursement until August 15th. I don't know.
Yeah.
It's however Iowa can play the game, that's just the game we got to play.
Yeah. Yeah. And unfortunately, because these things are this is not public information, these dealings are private.
Mm-hmm.
We may never know.
We may never know.
We may never know if he pocketed money and then took off. That is what we have right now. And until these things function through the universities themselves and become public information, there's a lot of things we don't know that are happening. And
this story might just be the tip of the iceberg. There may be worse stories that Iowa's probably dealt with that we would never know.
Yeah. There's a guy named CJ Frederick that played at Iowa a few years back that fans have some suspicion of, Frank, but I won't go there. Anyways, Frank, appreciate you being here. And
I appreciate you, Corey.
Yeah, and again, we're not done talking Iowa men's basketball yet, because the Hawkeyes with a 91-78 victory in the first round of the NIT. Let's keep the season going as long as possible. Reminder to everybody to enter our Iowa Smokehouse Bracket Challenge. Both the men's and the women's groups are up via ESPN. Search From the Hawkeye of the Storm, or just click the links to our From the Hawkeye of the Storm Bracket Challenge groups in our description. And of course, you can support the show a couple simple ways by hitting that like button before you leave, subscribing to the channel if you haven't done so, telling others about what we're doing here throughout the year. All kinds of content coming year-round here From the Hawkeye of the Storm with great people like Frank. And, of course, all of our coaches, Kashina Alexander. It's just a great group of people who work here. So, again, thank you to everybody. And the plan is we'll be publishing content throughout the week, but we've got women's postgame definitely Saturday. We've got to wait to see when the men play. The men are scheduled to play either Saturday or Sunday. And to give everybody an update, I know it was brought up earlier, but I can give you an official update on the Utah game. UC Irvine has cut that game to 6 with a minute and a half. Utah has led by as many as 17 points. UC Irvine has fought back to get it within 6, minute and a half to go over on ESPN2. So you want to flip that on real quick, you certainly can do that. Iowa plays the winner. And, of course, if Utah wins, Iowa will be heading out into Ute country. So we'll have that post game either Saturday or Sunday. Frank, appreciate your time, sir. And don't forget to tell Tony what I told you.
I got you, Corey. I ain't forgetting.
All right, folks. For Frank Henderson, I'm Corey Brada from the Hawkeye of the Storm. Have a great night. We'll talk to you soon.